It's currently 6:05. Thank you all for being here. We're going to just kick it off and just go through who we are. So for the first part, there we go. Meeting agenda, just welcome introductions. We'll go through redistricting, the historical context, review of the subcommittee's charge, go through some data needs for the subcommittee, and then any questions people wanted to bring up in addition to ones we've already done. And then at the very end is public comment. Taylor just joined us. Perfect timing. So as a reminder, this is a hybrid meeting. Please announce your name before speaking to identify yourself. We'll become very quickly acquainted over our few months together. Please mute yourself when not speaking. Note this meeting is being recorded and posted for the public. So we will be commenting on all of your attire. And then subcommittee members, please tap your name into the chat for the roll call. And Elena is also going to be our representative here. That is just want everyone to know she's wonderful, has been very helpful for this subcommittee as she has been for the Redding Consortium. And so we'll be taking all the role. Anyone to add on to that, Emily?
No, I think that covers it.
Perfect. Well, let's jump into introductions. I'll kick it off. I'll let Emily kick that off. Emily, co-chair.
Good evening, everybody. I'm pretty sure that everyone on the call already knows me, but I'm the COO, CFO of Colonial School District.
I'm Aaron Bass, CEO of Eastside Charter School and Redding Consortium member since 2019.
Hey, everybody. Ted Ammon, Chief Operating Officer for Red Clay.
And just round robin, so jump in.
Nick Hansman, good evening, everyone. I'm the Education Analyst at OMB.
Taylor Hawk, Director of Legislative and Political Strategy, DSEA.
Sean Sokolowski, Director of Business for Newcastle County VOTEC.
Hi, I joined late. Rick Geisenberger, Secretary
Rick.
of Finance.
Appreciate you being here, sir.
Absolutely.
And do we hear from Maria? Oh, you're on mute, Maria. You're still on mute. There you go.
There we go. Am I off mute?
You're off mute. We can hear you now.
Okay, Maria Matos. I'm a commission member, but I'm also the president of the Latin American Community Center.
Perfect. And there'll be, you can clearly see on this slide, there are more people here. Unfortunately, couldn't be here tonight, but they will be at our future meetings on the committee. We thank you all for being here tonight. So redistricting historical context. So the mission of the Redding Consortium, Emily, you want to take it from there?
Yeah. First thing I want to maybe just to kind of set expectations on how quickly we can move through some of these slides, because we do have a lot of stuff that we want to kind of try to dig into. Is anybody completely kind of coming at Redding from a new perspective where they don't have a lot of the background or context around how we got to where we are this evening? And just knowing most of the room, I'm going to assume that all of us have some grounding in the efforts that have been going on. So I think we can probably skip ahead a couple slides, but this is just good context. If there were members of the public here, which I don't believe there are any, or any members that, were new to the work or didn't have the context, there's a ton of great information on these slides. But since all of us have the context and we do have a lot to get through, I think jumping ahead a couple more might make sense. Yep. This just kind of goes through some of the previous efforts that have been done. And then I think the next one gets into the charge of the.
Before we get to that, just real quick, the previous redistricting efforts, has anybody on this Zoom been in the previous Neighborhood Schools Committee, Wilmington Education Task Force, WEAC or WEIC? Ted has.
I have.
Maria has. Rick?
No.
No? Oh, wow. Okay. Taylor, no?
What you mean, was I involved in any of these earlier?
Any of the previous
No,
efforts?
I was not.
Okay.
I
It was-
helped
I
staff.
became Secretary of Finance in 2017, so.
And Emily definitely was.
Yeah.
Perfect. So,
Three before.
this information is also online on the Redding Consortium website as well, just so you can access that. I've had a chance to read a number of the previous documents. Each one of these failed for different reasons. And so we're still in this certain conversation, but for those that have the historical context, we appreciate all that you've done. And our expectation is that this actually gets accomplished in the Redding Consortium, but you'll see a lot of it builds off of the previous work. So we did not want to negate that at all. And Bob Vaca just joined us. Bob, you there?
I am.
Perfect.
Sorry
So we
about
need to, before you came, we had quorum and passed the rule that anybody that gets there last owes everyone $5. So hopefully
Deal.
it's not you.
No.
Did you want to introduce yourself, Bob?
Yes, of course. I'm Bob Vaca. I'm the Chief Financial Officer here at Christina School District. I apologize for being late this evening. As many of you probably know, we're a little busy here these days, trying to stay out of the news, but unfortunately, that's keeping us preoccupied. Apologies.
You're fine, Bob. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Then we'll review some of the other members of the a later slide as well. So we're just doing historical context right now of what's been taking place at the Redding Consortium. Emily, I paused you with the 28 separate governing units and 11,000 children. Here you go.
Right. So basically, this just shows geographically, the issue of having a segregated district, or not segregated, but geographically separate district for the city of Wilmington. As you can see, the purple is Christina, and then the suburban portion of Christina is in the purple on the western side of Newcastle County. And so there's 4 districts that have a presence in the city of Wilmington, and obviously a number of charter schools as well. And then you also have the dynamic where Wilmington residents can obviously choice out 2 districts beyond just the 4 that are represented here. So this is just kind of the current state of affairs for district boundary lines.
So going back to historical context, the week plan. Sorry, I have a very large dog. The WIG plan failed to pass the General Assembly, stalled since. Redding Consortium started in 2019. For those that are new to Redding Consortium, just a heads up, this was the initial plan for Redding Consortium. And then when COVID happened, there were some changes with that. Also, Redding Consortium started looking at some other pieces of how to address education. And so there's a number of things such as paying for higher education for people for states, staff in the city of Wilmington. There's also a focus on the settlement that was done. So some of the foci shifted, and then it's been reignited towards this conversation, which is where we are. So where are we now? Emily, you want to jump in?
Yep. So the full Redding Consortium approved a plan to move the efforts forward in May of this year. As you can see, the components that were part of that plan are really pretty minor. The only thing that was approved or agreed upon by the Redding Consortium as the plan for moving forward is that Christina needs to leave the city of Wilmington, right? They need to kind of abandon their presence in the city. And I think there was one other provision that they wanted 2 or fewer districts to remain serving, city of Wilmington students. Beyond that, there was not a commitment in any way, shape, or form to what the rest of the plan would look like. So the timeline that you see, there is an 18-month timeline. We have some additional slides laying out some of the details of how that 18-month timeline is going to go. But in addition to kind of setting the bar or setting the stage that really the ultimate goal is to get Christina out of the city, they created the 3 subcommittees, one of which we're obviously meeting on tonight. The other one is looking at the operational impacts and then community engagement. I think it's fair to say that there's probably overlap with all three of them, but most, operational impacts and fiscal impacts in a lot of ways are going to be very muddy to kind of pull apart, just because every operational aspect of running a school has a financial component to it as well. So I think that's some of what we want to talk about at some point, is how we're going to not duplicate efforts with the operational subcommittee. But that is briefly, what was included in the interim plan in May.
Yep. Any questions on any of that? So this is, again, social drivers, what they're focusing on, facility landscape to examine the broader ecosystem and implications. A framework for final redistricting is taking place to include more detail on broad policy reforms related to revenue, state investment in charter and choice reform. This is proposed timeline that Emily was mentioning. So we are now December 2024. That was the first meeting. AIR is also doing the work for the landscape to try to answer some of these questions. As you see, we are planning to continue working through June 2025 and November 2025 to finalize the plan of what's taking place for all of Redding Consortium with redistricting. So again, it's 18 months going from December all the way through pretty much the end of November 2025. Excuse me, 2026, 18 months, excuse me.
There you go.
Yeah. It's like, that's not full number. So what we are doing is going to inform a lot of the work that's taking place for the other committees. And so we're trying to get as much information done now. You can also check out the last Redding Consortium meeting for the AIR proposal, where they actually did discuss what's taking place for the landscape. There's also a lot of pieces we're looking to have answered before we get to that point.
So essentially, we have roughly a year to do the kind of core work of the committee, and then that work is going to roll up into the, well, I guess less than a year, right? Because we have to provide recommendations that can then be incorporated into the consortium's recommendation, which finalizing, that is in November of 25. And then the last 6 months are really kind of walking that plan through all of the public vetting and approvals, hopefully that, that will be happening. So it's actually, in terms of the work effort of this group, less than a year.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. So the 18-month timeline started when the interim plan passed back in May. So yeah.
Okay. Got it.
So let's review. We talked about the three different subcommittees: operations, fiscal, and then community engagement. You'll also see some of the questions we've been asking beforehand. So that, as Emily said, there is overlap. All of you were either selected or appointed, as you're well aware, and why you're here. The Fiscal Impacts Subcommittee, the subcommittee may work to address these stipulations, and this is what was given to us as our charge. I'll let you read that. And just we're on the same page, there is no plan in place as of today. To say it frankly, we're not just working just to work, because there was already a template that was already done.
Can I ask a question about that charge a second?
Sure thing.
And I guess I'll ask Emily, or maybe I should ask you, Aaron. At some point, there needs to be sort of an assessment of what this means. We know where the rubber hits the road is going to be property taxes. I don't know if that's picked up in this concept of distribution of financial obligations. I guess there's the financial obligations of the districts, and then there's the financial obligations of the taxpayers. And then figuring out to what extent is there a gap that needs to be filled by some level of state funding if you're trying to hold taxpayers as a whole harmless? Because I think that's going to be the major political question, right? But I mean, there may be lots of questions, but if there's some disproportionate impact on property taxes, it's going to have a huge impact, right?
Great.
So does that pick this up? Do we feel this charge picks that issue up? I guess is my question, Emily. And maybe the word distribution of financial obligations. I guess I would probably write distribution of capital assets, financial obligations, and and property tax obligations.
So you'll see that's actually part of the questions that we have in what we're doing. So while this is the charge for the subcommittee, the questions you just asked are part of the questions we're actually reviewing, because that is going to be important, especially with looking at one, taking place with property taxes, two, what's taking place with if you do make shifts with Christina School District, then what does that mean for the suburbs that are not being included in Wilmington, and then et cetera. So definitely being a part of the conversation, not necessarily spelled out directly in the charge, but will definitely be a part of the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, and I do think it is sort of implicit in, if you say the stipulation is that the funding locally will facilitate effective implementation, there are a lot of assumptions that could be made about what that actually means. And I think one of the things that we probably want to, Aaron and I probably want to bring back to the larger consortium is, how much direction can we expect to get in terms of what the commission or what the consortium feels is politically viable? Because, you mentioned hold harmless for taxpayers. If that is something that the consortium wants to see, then that should, I would love to have that as a guiding principle when we start our work, rather than as we get to the end of it and we put something together that doesn't hold them harmless in some way, shape, or form, and it's seen as a non-starter by the larger body. So
right, and I don't know that the answer is hold harmless, but there's going to be some range of what's reasonable and what's not reasonable. I mean,
right. But whatever
I'm not
those
sure anybody
guardrails
cares
are,
if it moves the numbers around 1 or 2%, who cares? But if it starts moving the numbers in double digits, it's going to get a lot of attention.
So, Emily, we discussed this a little bit offline, I guess a week or two ago, maybe 3 weeks now, about building the system I'm building over here to actually dimension what's moving. So I have a system we've built here that connects to Newcastle County parcel database, and we're downloading property and we're integrating that with GIS data to see what homes and what properties are moving from Christina to one of the other districts, and what the household or the property is taxed in the old world and in the new world, with the new market value, assessed value, also flowing into our system, that we can see the money moving and what that could potentially mean. In other words, we could define what's in play before we actually do anything beyond our system analysis, to see what we have in the current footprint and what the new footprint for the receiving districts would look like in terms of taxes that we currently receive versus taxes through tax reassessment, and what would be moving. I feel like we could actually have a pretty good handle on that answer pretty early on, because I've been working with this data now for 4 or 5 months now. I'm just testing out the market, the new assessed values that we're pulling down from Newcastle County now, to see if I can comfortably assign those to the properties, which I've done the old values to the property. So I don't see a reason why I can't do the market values to the properties as well.
And is it set up in a way that you can update it? I mean, obviously the assessed values don't become final for, I don't know how many months. And I'm sure that I already know that there's going to be a lot of appeals, particularly in some of these areas that have been identified, because I'm hearing some issues, particularly in the city, regarding some perceived overvaluations. So my suspicion is that some of those appeals will be successful, probably not all of them, but some of them probably will be. So we need to have the ability to update it in March or April when all this stuff is final. I don't know when it's final.
So we're updating our data nightly from Newcastle County.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay,
they
that's
update
fantastic.
the parcel value today, and it's updated in the system. If they update the property with the new value, we'll get it in our nightly update. So yeah, it has to be prompt, because with the appeals, if the numbers are moving that quickly, which I expect they will, literally, even if this wasn't going on, I wanted this just to see what the impact with tax reassessment property reassessment would do to our taxpayers. So just in that spirit, we started that work. So I feel like we would be able to do that. Now I just need to test this out in the next week or two. I have my developer coming in again on Friday, so I feel like I can probably have a more definitive answer. And this is information that I would need to share with all of you folks impacted on the Zoom tonight. So it would be something that we would open up to the group here, so that I'm not the only person looking at this data. So it's an integrated tax system from Newcastle County with GIS software. We recruited somebody out of DOE that was famous for doing this work when he was in Dover, who's doing it now for us. So I think we'll have a pretty good answer, at least early enough where everybody understands what's potentially in play here. And if in fact we are going to hold the taxpayer harmless or neutral, that one's a tough one to answer. And I'm not sure how we do that without impacting districts, because not taking taxes from the taxpayer is one thing, but not having receipts going into the districts is somewhere that income has to be made up. So it's not that easy to just say, we'll neutralize it for the taxpayer without addressing how the districts will make up that lost revenue if they're not receiving it through the tax system.
Okay. I didn't mean to send us down a rat hole, but
No,
it's very helpful to know that. I feel a lot better knowing that system exists, because I was like, if it doesn't exist and we had to start it from scratch, that could take quite a long time.
Yeah, building it took a while, but once we got it running, it's pretty
That's
cool.
fantastic.
We've been running it now about 9 months, testing it with the actual values. Now with the new ones, we have to just validate.
Yeah.
And I'm going to populate with some bogus rates to see if it works. But I feel like that would be a good tool for us to use. The only other question that I have that I'm very, very concerned about from Christina is just the length of time that we are in limbo, that Christina is no longer going to be in Wilmington. I liken this to when I was in banking and doing mergers and acquisitions. When Wells Fargo was acquired by Norwest Bank, they didn't announce it today and then do the merger in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. You do it immediately, so you don't have customer runoff and you don't have employee runoff. We've had employee runoff. We've had the loss of employees in Wilmington and the difficulty of staffing the schools because their concerns coming out of the CEA is just that they're fearful that they'll lose their seniority, they'll lose something in their compensation, their stability. Why would I go to one of these 4 schools if I could go to one of the other schools in Wilmington, Brandywine or Red Clay, one of the other districts, or stay in the suburbs? So staffing has become an increasing challenge for us. I know the timeline is already aggressive, but that's my greatest worry, is we're already hanging on by the fingernails because we are in limbo. They know we're not keeping, but they don't know where they're going.
We'll definitely keep that to heart as we also share our information with the overall consortium,
Right.
which also includes many of the legislators that are part of the decision making for that. And to Rick, no apologies needed at all. This is actually the conversation we're looking at, which is what is the fiscal impact as well as what does it mean to the taxpayer? I think the other question, we'll get into the questions in a minute, is also looking at the quality, because even if we happen to say this is the right funding to be where we currently are, there's a larger question about what is the necessary funding to make sure that a child in Wilmington, after redistricting does take place, is going to be successful. And I don't even think that we have that current answer right now, in addition to just saying, if we just shifted districts around, what is the fiscal impact? What is the right impact we should be having for children? And then how do we go from there? So
Yeah.
Go ahead, Wyndham.
No, let's move on to the other slide. I'm sure I can add my commentary at a later point.
Perfect. So we just went through, you saw the already who's on our committee, those that are here and those that are also not here today. You'll also see here, so this is the overall Redding Consortium. So of course, Tizzy Lockman or Senator Lockman and Matt Dinn are our co-chairs for the overall Redding Consortium. The redistricting has been led by Namdi Chukwocha, state representative, who has been doing this since 2019, leading that charge with some other co-chairs in the seats. Our advisory supports our Secretary Holodick of Education and Cora Scott, and then Lisa Henry and Paulette Getty. And then we also have our House Minority Caucus member who will be working with the Redding Consortium as we move forward. So while we're on the subcommittee, this is actually those that are leading the overall consortium in which we share our information as well. The planning process. Emily, you want to jump in there?
Yep. So as we move forward, these are sort of, I think, grounding principles, if you will, that, be focused on the planning around the reassignment. And the big key one is, determining the optimal way for 2 or fewer districts to continue to serve the city. And I think that sort of to go back to the previous conversation, in my personal opinion, and I think we can have a discussion about this, but I think some of the question around the equity, not equity, but the adequacy of the funding may be a little bit outside of our charge, right? Because redistricting has enough fiscal impacts if you just assume that we're staying, whatever the funding system is today is going to be the funding system that exists whenever the new lines are drawn and the new, and the new dynamic takes over. That will take us as much time as we have, and probably more if we had the time. There is work going on in other committees, other groups to look at the adequacy of the funding system overall. So that sort of gap analysis that Aaron was talking about quality, right? Because we can shift boundary lines all we want. And if there's not enough money going into the city, it doesn't matter who's managing that money, we're not going to get good outcomes. I think for at least initially, we need to kind of set that aside and just look at how the chessboard moves and what the fiscal impacts of that are, with the assumption that, the Public Education Funding Commission is looking at what funding system do we have going forward. They're more focused on state funding than they are on the local side, but the local is definitely a part of that. Redistricting is not part of their charge in any way. But whatever we put forward, could potentially be fitting into whatever that new framework or the new funding system that is recommended out of that committee, would dovetail together. So I think the adequacy question of how much money would the city need to continue to actually get improvements, I think it's subject for whether or not that is part of our charge that we have to address. So,
and we do have ideas, but again, for the charge, Emily's 100% correct. In the chat also for Maria Matos, the goal, parents in the Colonial School District asked why it's going to remain in Wilmington, redistribute Southbridge kids. Just want to add in, the goal is 2 or fewer districts, which will have an impact on Colonial as well as Christina School District as well. So discussion of the data needs for the subcommittee. There are a number of questions that we have already started posing. The purpose of today was just grounding you in, one, what is the fiscal subcommittee that you're a part of? So our goal today was not to say, here's the worksheet and here's what we're going to do. Bob has a lot of information to be sharing with us. We're looking forward to that, also to answer the questions we're talking about. But I want to just show you what has already been requested, and that we also, at the end of this, we'll get into a conversation about what else is needed. So the group is more powerful than just individuals in this conversation. So we'll get into that. So right now, 1217 to 117, we're just seeking answers to questions about the fiscal impact. That's the 30-day plan. So our next meeting is 1/17. We'll have more information to share with you at the new STEM Hub at Eastside Charter School if you want to come in person or virtual. Then until 2/17, that's we start to, for us, our 60-day plan is pressure test some of these ideas. And then by March 17th, we are looking to submit mostly final proposal. As you see, we do have a lot more time, but we do want to start answering some of these questions so that we can have a bigger impact on the other committees. Our committee is not going to be done on March 17th, just to be very clear. We do expect to go longer than that. As you saw, the final proposal and voting is in 2026. But I'm pretty sure once we develop, here's a proposal and here's some of the answers, so we can also give the urgency to Christina teachers and say, this is what this could potentially look like. There's some more understanding what's taking place. So that's the 90-day plan. And then we'll also be tweaking that with the fiscal impact scope. Any questions on that accelerated? Ted, I see.
Yeah, in terms of that 30-day piece and seeking these questions, is there any thought to, you mentioned WEIC and WEAC and I was on those years ago, and we came up with a number of questions that some may still be relevant, some may not. But is there thought that we would sort of pre-populate these questions with those, and as a group go through them and say, hey, this question, was already put on the table and we believe it's still there. And there's probably some other questions that didn't come up. I'm just wondering if that might be a way to jumpstart that first 30 days.
Yes, Emily and I have been going through some of that, and that's also what I was referencing, which is on the Redding Consortium website. And so to answer your question, yes. And I would push every member here, if for any reason, and Ted, I thank you for your being a part of the previous work. If for any reason you feel like we've missed something, please jump in. Please definitely jump in. The goal here is not to simply hear Emily and I speak. This is really a working group, and we want to make sure we are looking under every stone, because in the day, this is what matters for kids. So please jump in. Good question.
Yeah, I think Aaron and I talked about, a lot of this work has been done. I mean, you can see the questions here. There's probably estimates that Red Clay developed during WEIC, because I know that you guys did an intense amount of analysis on what absorbing, Christina facilities would cost, the leveling up, getting them on the same systems, all that kind of stuff. So I think a lot of that stuff could just be kind of copied and pasted over, do a quick inflation factor for the 8 years that it's been since those numbers were generated. I think, I guess what I'm struggling with, is really part of the reason, in my opinion, that these efforts have not gone forward is because of the disproportionate fiscal impact. I mean, there's a lot of political considerations of this, but money is always held out as, well, we don't have enough, we can't afford to do this right now, so we're just not going to do it. So to Secretary Geisenberger's point, do we look at this from what plan would minimize the impact to all of the stakeholders, right? The state budget being a stakeholder, the local taxpayer being a stakeholder, because if we hold the taxpayers harmless, and I realize you were just offering that as kind of an option, right? It wasn't a recommendation or a stipulation, but if we operate under that assumption that there is going to be some sort of impact somewhere, if it can't all land on the state and it can't all land on the taxpayer, how do we create a plan that really minimizes the financial impact that is felt all over the place, which is a little less than just kind of, it's a little more directed than just pulling all the information together again. I think Bob's tool is really going to be sort of a powerhouse of allowing us to run scenarios and look at different possibilities and really kind of get a pretty quick glance at
So
what
Emily,
the-
can I ask you a question? And I
Yeah.
do not purport to be a school financing expert. I'm sure you are. But I know there's this pot of funds that is being totally re-examined in terms of and I forget now what it's called, division. It's a division 3 or what are they?
equalization.
Equalization. You got equalization, but I also hear there's like a Newcastle County pool.
Yes.
I don't know what that is. It seems to me somehow between equalization, whatever this Newcastle County pool is, and the taxpayer, the taxes that somehow you could leverage all of those to make this all work. But I guess my question is there an opportunity to have that kind of interaction? Because first you kind of need to say, well, let's assume nothing happened, nothing changes with the Newcastle County pool and nothing changes with equalization. But ideally, once you see where the difference is, you can say, okay, well, how do we plug it with these other two vehicles? That would be the first place you want to go, right? Now, if you can't plug it with those other two vehicles, then yeah, you're going to need new money.
Well, you're going to need new money regardless because equalization is already being distributed, right? And so if it gets redistributed in any way, there's going to be winners and losers of that redistribution.
Well, obviously the idea is to get it distributed to where it's needed. Right?
Agreed. But whatever amount is being, whatever amount Christine is getting today, if it goes somewhere else next year, Christine is going to feel a negative effect from that, right? So I think new money has to be on the table on
No, I'm
some
not suggesting
level.
new money shouldn't be on the table. It just seems to me
Right.
that the first question people are going to ask is about understanding how these other two pools are being reallocated now that you've done a statewide reassessment, right? I mean,
So there is actually an equalization. There's a consultant working with the Department of Education on equalization and whether or not that formula should be revamped or done differently because it has been frozen for so long. I think reassessment kind of negates the need to do a different equalization formula because the whole reason it didn't work is because the assessment data was so outdated. So I think that problem will largely fix itself when we've got the updated assessment data. There's still policy considerations on the levers within the equalization formula that can shift money where it needs to go right now based on, current metrics that haven't been updated. But I think the core of the formula is relatively solid. And then reassessment, again, we're going to have better information or better assessment data. The tax pool is basically a revenue sharing arrangement between the 4 districts that serve Wilmington. If we're not going to have 4 districts serving Wilmington anymore, it does kind of call into question the purpose or the reason behind the tax pool. So I think that absolutely needs to be part of what we're looking at and how that would play into whatever we do moving forward. So there are definitely components to what we need to look at.
and
'cause
again,
you
I don't
can't
know that I fully
Yeah.
understood that, but there shouldn't be a windfall to Christiana taxpayers of having, they don't have to pay into the pool. I don't know if that creates a windfall to them or not. But there shouldn't be a windfall from leaving the city. So anyway.
Which is a good question for us to then look at what is the fiscal impact overall.
Right.
I'm not sure if everyone also noticed that while we're having a conversation, these are just the questions that we've already posed to seek to get answers for. And the purpose of sharing this with you all, so we didn't want you to think, we want to give you a head start of what we've already been thinking about. We can share this with you as well, this deck, so you can just see what those questions happen to be, as well as the additional conversation coming from tonight. which then leads to the request of this group. The purpose of the night is, which we started already getting into, is what else do we need to make sure that we are asking? And these are overlapping questions from other subcommittees as well, just so you're aware, which is dealing with the operations as well as the social determinants. So what we can do is share this with you so you're aware of what the questions are. I don't want you to feel like if you don't ask tonight, then we didn't ask. And another piece is just look at what other questions do you think need to be there, which to Rick's questions around the current funding structure, what could already be in place? What is the impact on every district when they move out of the city of Wilmington? What is the impact on those that are currently in the city of Wilmington? What other funding is currently there? And then how does this all impact the taxpayer? And again, there are some questions that will bleed over into other committees, just FYI. So I wanted to share that with you all as well. Taylor, I saw you just came off of mute.
Yeah, can I jump in? Because I saw there was a
Yeah.
question about the salary differentials for teachers, but I want to add to
Yes.
that because we have more than just teacher contracts in these districts. We got food service workers, paraprofessionals, secretaries, and Colonial's case transportation, but there's a number of job categories that are going to be affected. And in addition to salary differentials, I also have gotten questions about other financial benefits that might exist within a contract from one district to another, like tuition reimbursement, for example. So however I can be helpful in trying to parse through what those differences are from district to district and contract to contract, happy to help.
Appreciate that. Elena, I'm assuming Elena's taking all the notes and so just adding on to those questions as well. Appreciate that.
You know, one bullet I don't think I see on here that we talked to earlier is that Newcastle County tax pool, because the history of that was the last time districts got shuffled or rearranged or moved, whatever word we want to use, and here we are doing that again. So that certainly, I think Newcastle County tax pool was based on assessed value back at the time, which we're here again. If we're changing the assessed value of Christina in its totality, it's going to be time to revisit or maybe even create another tax pool. Not that I'm suggesting that, but that just is going to come out of these discussions, I think.
Yep, need to consider that. Yep.
I don't know if it's a question, but I think it'd be helpful to see like the map you showed earlier with the different districts and any high school, elementary, middle schools that may be impacted either within the area that's going to be redistricted or nearby that would assume a lot of the children. I think that might be helpful just to get an idea of how many schools could potentially be transferred from one district to another district. If any.
Yeah, I think there are some additional details about that in previous Redding documents, as well as some of the WEAC stuff that happened. Because the plan for WEAC was, similar in that Red Clay and Brandywine would take over the Christina and Colonial portions of the city. Actually, I'm getting mixed up. WEAC, I think, kept us in because we made a pitch that we wanted to stay in. But Redding was going to pull us out in Colonial entirely. So the buildings themselves, I think there was a good amount of work done by Red Clay and what that impact would be for buildings. Yeah. Is it too, and again, I'm asking, just knowing kind of the granularity that can completely overwhelm. Because we will not have the authority or time to renegotiate with any of the union groups that would be impacted. So is there a way to, I guess we can't necessarily project fiscal impact if we don't know what the union is willing to accept, et cetera. So I think we might want to put something around a caveat of these are fiscal considerations that need to be in the mix of conversation, but we can't necessarily put a dollar figure to them because we're not you know, we're not in control of costing them out with those groups in real time. So however that can be accounted for, because that's, you know, given how much salary how significant salary spend is for schools, that is going to be a potentially big number that we're not going to be able to get a good handle on.
Well, I can give you a precise number around how much the salaries cost for this 4 schools. And in fact, there's supplemental pay that our teachers are receiving, both in bonus as well as extended day, that puts the schools in Wilmington at a premium greater than where we are in the suburban schools. So I can cost that out literally to the penny by building and by bargaining unit. So that dimensioning all of these data points is not going to be very difficult to do. I've been studying this now for some time. So giving you all those answers won't be that difficult to provide. I also want to just do a little level setting here. It's my impression, looking at these numbers, that we are supplementing the 4 Wilmington schools from a tax base greater than the Wilmington tax base as well as the pool, meaning we're supplementing from the suburban tax base for those 4 schools to make up those supplements that we're paying to the teachers in those 4 schools. That's not coming out of state funds. Christina's continued to supplement on the order of an extra 6% on salaries and an extra $3,500 a year per teacher in terms of stipends for retention. Part of the challenge, as I mentioned earlier, about retaining employees, we've been doing this in order to hold the base as close to full as we can, and we've not been very successful with that, but we're still paying premium money to those schools, to the staff in those schools. In fact, I did a per student cost probably about a month or so ago, and we're averaging on the order of cost per student in our high schools in Pritch, in Maurice Pritchett Academy, and in Bayard, close to $50,000 per student. And the next closest middle and elementary is like $35,000. So we're paying a much more significant cost per student in those buildings than we are in the traditionals. I feel like I can give you all real data around that. That doesn't mean answers so much as this is the current environment we're working with, and these are the pieces that are in play. So we're making more informed decisions, better informed decisions around what would the receiving districts have to account for. I think the bargaining units is a big challenge, talking to ours on a regular basis. Their greatest concern is longevity. They're maintaining their seniority in the union. This notion that they would have to interview for a new job will frighten them right out of work. If they heard that there's a risk that they could be out of work by moving, that'll just accelerate the exodus in these schools. And it could create a crisis for us if we wind up, and I say us, I mean all of us here, not just Christina, but whoever's receiving, the notion that somebody could be out of a job by moving the schools to a different district. We may want to put a grace period in there where we don't do that for a year or two, so that we make the transition period a little bit softer landing for staff and for schools, because the receiving district could have a massive crisis on their hands if they're forced to interview and place immediately upon assuming the responsibilities for the buildings. And it's not just the teachers, as you brought up, Taylor, all the bargaining units are concerned. It's just our teachers are, as you would expect, the most vocal about this.
And I'll underscore all of Bob's points on that, especially the seniority piece. That seniority and pay are 2 of the top issues that I keep.
Yeah.
And I think you're right about there's the crisis. Like there are so many unanswered questions, but that's what we're here to figure out. So.
Yeah, my CEA pres said to me just yesterday, met with Bob Andrzejewski and I, and said, just pull the Band-Aid off. Just move the schools now. If we just move the buildings now, we'll be happy as a lark. And obviously there's a whole lot of work to do before we can do that, but they're ready. They're ready for a decision and an action to occur.
That really good feedback. We will not do that tonight, unfortunately.
No Band-Aid ripping off?
Yeah, no. The
Aaron, you said no votes tonight, right? So
no votes
can't vote
tonight.
on
There's
that.
no quorum.
I'll tell them I tried. I offered and they said, no, not yet.
But I do want to underscore I would hate for one, there's definitely a crisis, and there's also a crisis in not knowing. And it's also interesting because those that are on consortium members are even here, and those at the state and city level don't have those answers today. And so I don't want to shirk it off as if it's not important, because if my job is questionable for the next 18 months, maybe 2 years, that means a lot, because it's going to impact kids no matter how we do this. And so I do want to err on the side of caution that one, we're going to definitely share the information, and then two, we won't have that answer in 90 days even at all.
Right.
But I will definitely relay that to our leadership in the Redding Consortium. We're going to add that to the minutes and also try to figure out how do we make this work for everybody. And fiscal impact will not have governance necessarily over what takes place with the districts. And so we'll definitely be, even when the Band-Aid gets pulled off, we want to make sure that we're conveying everything that is shared tonight, especially around not just numbers, but the actual people. That's the staff that impact the students.
There is a concept I'd like to float by all of you just for reflection, not for necessarily a reaction or decision, but the notion, and I did this quite a bit in my prior life, as I mentioned earlier, in banking with mergers, the idea of potentially organizing the 4 schools into a unique bargaining unit. In other words, almost like a CSD, WLC type of an organization that's grandfathered, where we basically say on whatever the effective date is, this group of employees is part of this bargaining unit that grandfathers the employees, but then over time, organically, those employees can move into the receiving district when those districts have a better comp plan, comp offer, seniority offer to that employee, that we just basically grandfather and protect them in that way through transition. That's just an idea we've been kicking around here. Our union seems to be interested in that, but there's a lot to go into that work if that's something that we wanted to explore further.
And I think that would definitely need to be a conversation with the other
Right.
bargaining units impacted.
Right.
So,
Right.
And if you have anything written on that, Bob, that you've already been talking about, please share. I do know that Emily and I do want to spend time with the data that you have, so we can also expedite some of this work that you're currently doing, as well as, to Ted's point, make sure we're looking at the historical context. We're not just starting off fresh and having the same conversation over and over again. We're going to send out the questions that we talked about today, as well as this deck. Are there any other questions or comments from those that are here, as we have discussed the tax base, our taxpayer, as well as the impact on the actual people? We're going to convey those ideas to the leadership, because I think that is very salient, as well as our plan to have, this is what it looks like by March 17th. And of course, whatever we come up with on March 17th will not be a final plan. So I don't want anybody walking away feeling like 90 days is all we need to do, and that's it. We'll be reading and reacting to it. Are there any other questions for the group or comments?
Aaron, I just had a quick question. In terms of, you have this really robust list of things we want to get to. Who is the responsible party for providing that information? Is that something that some of that comes from the district, some of it comes from DOE, some of it comes from Department of Finance or OMB? Is that kind of been separated out into who's the responsible party for that?
Yeah. So what's been taking place is looking at who happens to have that data. So Bob Vaca has a great system in place, and so we'll be definitely reaching out to Bob Vaca. There's some stuff that's currently at DOE, so we're having those conversations. There are conversations right now we've unearthed that are also coming out of our unions as well. And so we want to make sure we're having some of that conversation. And so we are trying to put together a puzzle from many different places. Elena and her team have also been working to figure out what are those best places. And so I think there's some that already have some sources of information, and there's some we're adding on to. But if, for example, Taylor said, I already have all the breakdowns of all the staff at the different schools. beyond just the teachers. Bob currently has that in place right now. Then we're going to shift and go, we don't need to go request this from this certain person if we already have this in place. So if there's something from those questions that you already have answers to, and we'll send those questions out to you, please, 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 please say, I have this. Because I'm very clear, we don't have those answers right now.
There are a number of things in the data request list that are probably going to be coming from the districts in some way, shape, or form. So Bob, I know there's going to be a fair bit of this coming from you with with Christina information. But so I think the CFOs on the call are probably going to have a little bit of a heavier lift in providing some of the information. The timing of this is relatively fortuitous because we are in pretty regular communication with Newcastle County right now because of the reassessment project. So even if Bob's database was not available, I think, us kind of getting information from the county on, parcel information and what those impacts would look like we would be able to facilitate that at our level. So I don't know. I know we've also talked about what information or data sets might live at, CADSR at the university with Ed Ratledge and his team and the work that he's been doing for years with equalization and some of the state level funding stuff. So, but yeah, I think there's a fair bit of the questions that have been asked that we may have, I know some of it we've got internally in the districts. It was just sort of waiting for this meeting to kind of give everybody the context to start putting information forward. So.
Good question, Nick.
Yeah.
Just on my end, I won't be Secretary of Finance after January 20th. So the Governor Meyer's nominee is the current finance person for Newcastle County. So he'll probably be a lot more help than I can be anyway. So he'll replace me on the Redding Consortium and I assume on this body as well. So, but I will cheer from the sidelines, and if there's anything I can do to help, feel free to call upon me. I'm not falling off the face of the earth, and I live in the Brandywine School District, so I'd like to be helpful.
And thank you for your service to Delaware, Rick. I know it's not done yet, but I want to say thank you for your service as Secretary of Finance.
Well, I appreciate that. And as I said at the Redding Commission the other day, it's been a real privilege to get to sit in on the meetings ex officio and see the progress that has been made. It's really important. And, I'm sure the governor is looking forward to becoming mayor and actually becoming a member of the consortium. And, whenever you talk to him about why he's doing this, it's very much about the city and particularly the kids in the city. And it'll be a slightly different role, not necessarily controlling the purse as much, but certainly being able to be a vocal advocate for what you all are trying to do. So.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions, pushes right now? Perfect. We will send that information to all of you and definitely look forward to a lot of work in the next 90 days. Our next meeting is scheduled for 1/21. That'll be at Eastside Charter in the STEM Hub. Would love to have you all come out. It's actually open to the public, the actual STEM Hub, to adults, as I was sharing with Maria as we started off. And so love you to come check out the workforce development and mental health that'll be taking place in that space, as well as engage in fiscal impact conversations in our next steps. So look forward to that. You already should have an appointment for that in your calendar. It'll also be hybrid, so you can also come to the location. You can also come online as well on Zoom. I don't see any members of the public for public comment. So I'm going to stop the share. Thank you all. It's a pleasure meeting everybody. Emily and I have been working together since November on this, and we look forward to doing something awesome here as we try to bring a close to redistricting and the fiscal impact.
Yeah. Thank you,
you.
everybody, for taking
Yeah.
the evening out of the holiday season to talk finances with us. It's appreciated. And we hope you enjoy your holidays.
Same to you. Thank you.
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thanks.